some of the basics of using the Bokken, the wooden sword. So when I get onto the mat with a Bokken or with any other weapon, I want to bow with the weapon, with the Bokken, like so. So first of all, how to hold the sword in very basic ways. When I'm holding the sword between doing techniques or exercises, there are two ways we can hold the sword. First of all, in my right hand, I can hold it at the very top of the handle. This is the handle of the Bokken, right? The very top of that. And I hold it down to my side. I let the tip drop, but I do not let the tip touch the ground. That's very important. So the tip doesn't touch the ground, but it does drop, and I can hold the Bokken by my side. If I hold the Bokken in my left hand, I'm going to hold it with the blade up. You see the curvature of the blade, so this is the edge of the Bokken. I'm going to hold it like so, on the blade. And we do this because we're basically imagining that the Bokken is in its sheath, right? We don't usually use sheaths for Bokkens, but we're imagining that the sword has its cover and its blade is up, and I hold it like so, again, on my side. Right? So if this were a katana, an actual samurai sword, this is how I would draw it. Right? So you're holding it as if you were going to draw it. So this is how you would hold it in the left hand. In the right hand, you would hold it at the top of the handle, not the blade, with the tip down. Now, how we hold it when we are practicing and exercising. So, I'll start off in right hamni. My right hand is, again, at the top of the handle. My left hand is at the very bottom. And it needs to be at the very bottom, right? It can't be up here or choking up a little bit. It needs to be at the very bottom, maybe even, about halfway into your palm. You can see here. I want the handle of the Bokken to be right around my center, maybe just a little bit above the knot of my belt. The tip of the Bokken is around my eye height, like so. So we always hold the Bokken this way when we're holding the Bokken with two hands. We never switch. It's always right hand on top, left hand on bottom, and the left hand is always on the very bottom. We don't want to choke up on the Bokken. We have to hold it at the very bottom. So I'm in right hamni now, and when we switch hamni, the hands stay the same. So I go to left hamni, right? My hands stay the same. I'm in right hamni again. Right hamni is going to feel more natural. I go to left hamni. It's going to feel a little bit awkward because my arms are a little crossed, right? My front leg and my front hand do not match like it usually does when we're practicing empty hand technique, right? That's because I have to hold the Bokken in this particular way. I can't switch my hands, right? I have to hold it this way when I'm holding it with two hands. So that's going to feel a little awkward, but you'll get used to it. Again, back to right hamni. Now, when we lift the Bokken to strike, the right hand is going to act as a fulcrum, right? And the left hand is going to act like the action creating or working on that lever, right? So we're essentially leveraging the Bokken up our center line rather than lifting it, right? So this is the fulcrum of the lever. This is creating the action on the lever. And the Bokken comes straight up my center line, like so. The left hand is much more active than the right hand. The right hand is basically being the fulcrum, right? The point where the energy is tilting, but the action is created here. So that's a very important point because we don't want to lift the Bokken with our upper body, right? We're not lifting from the shoulders, like so. I'm leveraging the Bokken here. So I have a lot more control and a lot more power, and yet a lot less effort when I'm using the Bokken this way. Now to cut down, very similar action, right? I'm not using my upper body. I'm not moving from my shoulders. To cut down, I pull down with the left hand. Right? And the right hand is still the fulcrum of that lever. So that's why the left hand has to always be on the bottom. And if we choke up, it's much harder to do that. If you choke up on the Bokken, right? Say this is the first time using the Bokken, or the Bokken feels a little heavy to you, you might feel tempted to choke up, but that makes it even worse, right? Because if you choke up, then you're lifting the Bokken. So that left hand has to be at the very bottom of the Bokken, so you're not lifting it, you're leveraging it. And even if the Bokken feels heavy to you, that's where it's going to be the easiest, no matter what. Leveraging the Bokken is always easier than lifting the Bokken. Now, when I'm cutting with the Bokken, my cut has a little bit of an arc to it. I'm not bringing the Bokken straight down. There's a bit of an arc to it. It almost feels like if you were to let go of the Bokken, you could throw it across the room. So I'm cutting out and then down, out and then down, and my arms are staying very relaxed. From left hand me. It's a very similar motion to casting a fishing line, if you are familiar with fishing, right? So it's not straight down, out and down in an arc. And my blade stops right around my waist level or just a touch higher. What I don't want to do is I don't want to break my wrists. So I'm not here. Okay. My wrists are nice and firm, not tense, not tight, and not locked, but at the same time, they don't bend like this. And after my cut, on my follow-through, I don't want to lean forward. Right? That happens most often when you're bending your wrist. When you bend your wrist and you go way down, the momentum of the Bokken can take you forward. Right? You don't want that. So when I'm cutting with the Bokken, I want to use the Bokken in my Bokken practice to become more aware of my center and my center line and to move from my center. So the Bokken is coming up my center line, a little bit above my forehead. Doesn't want to be way up here, doesn't want to be in too close, a little bit above my forehead, down my center line. And then when I leverage the Bokken back to cutting position, just traveling up my center line. Here, here. I don't want the Bokken to come off my center line. Right? I don't want to cut here, I don't want to cut here. It always comes up my center line and then down. There's some specialized exercises and specialized kata that uses this kind of strike, but our basic Bokken strike is always up our center line and down our center line. And one of the things that we get out of this practice is precisely that awareness of our center line and moving from our center. Here is one of the basic exercises we do with the Bokken. We're going to use the Bokken with just one hand and one arm. I'm going to start on my right side. and I'm going to grip the Bokken at the top of the handle like we always do with the right hand. And I'm going to draw the Bokken up my center line. And with my cut, just as if I were using two hands, I'm cutting in an arc. And I'm careful not to break my wrist, so I don't follow through here, here. Right around my waist level, my wrist is nice and straight, firm, but not rigid, not tight and constricted. So use this exercise for finding your center line with the Bokken. Now we do this exercise with the left hand in arm 2, but we do bring the left hand up to the top of the Bokken handle. It's really the only time that we bring the left hand to this position. When we're using two hands on the Bokken, we always have the left hand on the bottom. But for this particular exercise, we'll bring the left hand up here. Now I'll go back to my right side and we'll do basically the blocking maneuver, or a movement very similar to blocking maneuver, with just the one hand. So I'll face you to begin with. So when I come here and cut, now I'm going to come here and cut. So my tip is dropping to my outside. In right hamne, my outside is going to be to my right, here. My wrist is coming up my center line, right above my forehead. Then the Bokken turns, the curvature of the blade comes around my body, I find my center line again, and then I cut. So from this angle, there's my cut, Bokken tip goes to my outside, wrist comes above my forehead, up my center line, around, find my center line, cut. Still in right hamne. Tip drops, wrist comes to my forehead, up my center line, blade around, cut. Now, the wrist coming up my center line above my forehead is very important, because I want to stay away from the habit of twirling the Bokken in front of me, right? I'm not twirling the Bokken in front of me, right? The tip is dropping and my wrist is coming here. So it's a much more precise movement than any kind of twirling that might happen in front of me. I'm not twirling the Bokken, right? Here. And once I get to this point, because of the curvature of the blade, the Bokken wants to naturally come around my body. And it finds the center line again, and then my cut. Now for the Bokken to move this way, I have to grip it firmly, but yet at the same time softly. It sounds a little paradoxical. When I come here, the Bokken has to move a little bit in my hand, right? So my grip has to let up a little bit, but it can't let up too much. I don't want the Bokken, right? I don't want my grip to get too loose, or too wide, or too sloppy. So here. My grip has to loosen a little bit, but only a little bit. I still have a secure connection to the Bokken. And we do the same thing on the left side, in left hanmi. Again, it's the only time, one of the only times that we're using our left hand at the top of the handle. And now my tip is going to drop to the outside again, but now the outside is my left side. again, don't twirl the Bokken in front of you. Drop the tip, bring the wrist above your forehead, on your center line. Let the blade naturally come around your body. Now we'll do a very similar movement with the Bokken using two hands. I'll begin in right Hamni. And again, my tip is going to drop to the outside of my body. In right Hamni, that's going to be to my right. And the handle of the Bokken is going to come above my forehead. And the blade naturally wants to come around my body. I find my center line with the Bokken, then I cut. Tip drops. Handle comes above my forehead, around my body, find my center line, cut. Now again, with this exercise, just like with the previous exercise, it's very important not to get too twirly with the Bokken out in front of you. Right? The movement is very simple, but we have to pay attention to it in order to do it well. My tip drops, and the bottom of the Bokken comes up my center line above my forehead. So I'm not really twirling the Bokken out in front of me, like so. And the Bokken naturally wants to come around my body and find my center line. Now, we'll go to left Hanmi. My hands are going to stay the same on the Bokken because I'm using it with two hands now. So that left hand is always going to stay at the bottom. Right hand is always going to be at the top. Again, this is going to feel more awkward because we're not standing in the way that we usually would if we were empty-handed. Now I'm in left Hanmi, so my tip is going to drop again to my outside. That's my left side now. Here, tip drops. Bottom of the Bokken is still coming up to above my forehead, up my center line, around, cut. It might feel a little more awkward because my arms are going to cross, but that's not going to get in my way. I just have to get used to that awkward feeling. Tip drops. Handle of the Bokken comes above my forehead. The blade comes around. Cut down. So now we'll use this movement of the Bokken, this blocking maneuver of the Bokken, in a slightly different way. I'm going to start in right Hanmi, and I'm going to imagine that I'm reacting to a Shomanuchi strike coming to me, a Bokken strike coming to my forehead. So as that strike comes in, I'm going to move to my left side. I'm going to protect myself by moving off the line to my left side, and I do that with my back leg, my left leg, here. Now as I do that, as I move my center and my back leg a little bit off the line of attack, my tip drops, the handle of the Bokken comes above my forehead, and my body is behind the blade. The blade is protecting my body. Again, The Bokken doesn't have to move a lot here, so I don't want to get into the habit of thinking the Bokken has to do a lot here, has to get twirly, or has to intersect with the attacking Bokken. Right? All my Bokken has to do is the tip drops and the handle comes to my center line above my forehead. And that's what protects me. Now from there, I'm going to move into a Yoko Manuchi strike, a side strike. So from here, Bokken blade is going to come around my body, tip is going to continue to point down. My back leg is going to swing around here, Yoko Manuchi. Again, to my imaginary partner who has just attacked me with Shomanuchi, front strike. So here, here. Left side, tip stays down, this leg has to come around. So you'll have already noticed that as we're practicing this blocking maneuver, we're also practicing a strike, Yoko Manuchi strike. So we're practicing side strike. So again, I'm off the line, this is my block, the tip is dropped, handle is above my forehead, comes around my body, Yoko Manuchi, right? In this case, it's not Shomanuchi, not straight down my center line, cutting side strike. And again, make sure this back leg is moving all the way around, so my entire body is working, not just my upper body. Let's look at it from a different angle. Now, we'll go to our right side. We're going to stay in right Hamni. So now I'm responding to a Shomanuchi strike, but I'm simply going to my right side instead of my left side. So I'm going to move my front leg, my right leg. So again, I'm getting off the line. That's always the most important thing, getting off the line of attack. So my front leg is moving. My center goes with it. And again, my back leg has to swing around so I can give the proper Yoko Manuchi. Here, tip drops, goes around my body, back leg moves, Yoko Manuchi. On the side. Now a basic exercise to continue practicing Shomanuchi cuts with the Bokken. This time I'm going to stand in horse stance, so it's a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. My knees are going to be bent a little bit. Bokken, as usual, is on my center line. I'm going to stand up fairly straight here. I'm going to straighten up my knees. From here, as I do my cut, I'm going to lower my center here to the lower horse stance. Raise my center as I raise the Bokken, then down. Raise my center as I raise the Bokken, then lower my center. So it's my center that's moving up and down, not my back. So I'm not bending my back and forth as I'm doing this. Right? It's not about rocking my back and forth. It's about lowering and raising my center and having the Bokken follow along with that movement of my center. Now a view from the side. So again, my back isn't going forward or back. As center is moving up and down, the Bokken is following the center. Now another exercise using horse stance, and now we'll incorporate the blocking maneuver. So we'll go to horse stance, start on our center line, and I'm going to shift my center to one side, here, and block. Then my center comes back, Bokken comes around my body, finds my center line, I cut down. Then I shift to the other side with my center, block with the Bokken. My center comes back as the Bokken finds my center line, then cut down. Here, here. So as we've been emphasizing, try to make the Bokken movement as efficient as possible. In other words, there's not a lot of spinning and twisting in front of you. It's just the tip dropping and the bottom of the Bokken coming to your forehead. A big part of the relevance of Bokken practice to Aikido practice is learning to move from our center and our center line and becoming more aware of our center and our center line. So here's an exercise that really puts a lot of emphasis on that. So we'll start in right Hamni. And from right Hamni, I'm going to step back with my front leg and then lift the Bokken into an on guard position above my forehead. Like so. So, the Bokken is traveling with my center as my center is going back. So not a lot of extra movement with the Bokken, not a lot of lifting, right? The Bokken is simply traveling up my center line as my center comes back. Again, I want the bottom of the Bokken a little bit above my forehead, not too far. I don't want to be overextended here, and I also don't want to be crunched up, so it's not here or in front of my face. Okay? A little bit above my forehead here. Now as I step forward, I'll cut down. And remember, as we cut, we're pulling down with the left hand. So we're not moving from our shoulders. Okay? The cut is happening using the leverage of the Bokken itself. So here. Now we'll add one more step to this. On guard position. Now I'm going to lower the Bokken to my side, my right side, the blade facing out. It's going to stop right at my center, and the blade is going to be a little bit behind my body, where it's hard to see it if you're standing directly in front of me. Then I'm going to bring the blade back up to my center, find the center line, step and cut. So here, on guard position, take a moment to hold this. Then gently allow the Bokken to come down to your center. Blade is facing to the outside. The blade is pointing behind me, as if I'm trying to hold it. As if I'm trying to hide it. Bring it back to my center line, proper position. So look from this side view. Now I don't want the Bokken tip to drop here. I want it to stay parallel to my waist, to my center. Here. again, this exercise is really about moving from our center and our center line. So, as I'm doing this, I want to have the feeling that the Bokken is moving with my center, that I'm not lifting the Bokken. And I want to have the feeling that it's my center line that's moving back, not just the Bokken. The Bokken is an extension of my center line. Now we'll do a couple of exercises that continue to use the basic Bokken cut, continue to cultivate that movement, but also adds a little bit more body movement in what we're doing. So we'll be doing 4-direction cut and 8-direction cut with the Bokken. Now I'm going to start facing the direction that you are, so it'll be a little easier to figure out the movements. We'll start in right hanmi. So I'll start with my first cut. My second cut is going to be directly behind me. So let's look at this with a side view. My first cut, second cut is directly behind me. Now look at the efficiency of the movement of the Bokken. The Bokken's not moving a lot. It's moving a lot less than it might appear at first. So after my first cut, the Bokken tip is simply dropping, and the bottom of the Bokken is coming above my forehead. And I'm turning my center directly behind me. My feet are not moving very much. They're just shuffling a touch in order to keep my balance. If they don't move at all, I might lose my balance. I have to shuffle them just a bit to find good hamni when I go directly behind me, when I turn in the completely opposite direction. So from here, the tip drops, this comes up, I turn my center, like so. Now I'm in position for the next shomanuchi. And this is how it looks in your direction. Cut 1, here. Cut 2. So again, efficient movement with the Bokken. I'm not doing a lot of movement here, not a lot of twisting, not a lot of trying to move the Bokken in any particular place. I'm just dropping the tip, moving my center here. The bottom of the Bokken finds my center line above my forehead. That's my second cut. Cut 1, cut 2. Now, cut 3, my back leg, my right leg is going to come here and become my new front leg. So if you're thinking of the numbers on a clock, my back leg is going to go to 3 o'clock. Cut 3. So, cut 3, back leg moves here. Again, the tip of the Bokken just drops to my outside. Bottom of the Bokken comes to my forehead. So not a lot of twirling with the Bokken, right? Very efficient movement. Here, shomanuchi. Okay. Cut 1, cut 2, cut 3. Now, final cut, 4-cut exercise, right behind me. Again, let the tip of the Bokken drop, bottom of the Bokken finds my forehead and center line, here. So, let's look at them all 4 together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, one more time. Ich, ni, san, shi. Now we can add 4 more cuts to this exercise and make it 8-direction cut or 8-cut Bokken exercise. Basically, those 4 new cuts are going to be to the corners. So if our original pattern of movement visually looks like a cross, Now that pattern of movement is going to look like an asterisk. Right? So let's go through the 4 first. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5 is going to be to this corner. So my back leg comes here on the face of a clock. This is going to be 2 o'clock. 5. Now 6 is going to be directly behind me to this corner. Again, tip drops, bottom of the Bokken comes to my center line above my forehead. 6. 7 is going to be back to 2 o'clock. It's a new 2 o'clock though. It's going to be this corner. 7. Final cut is going to be directly behind me. 8. This corner. Right? So, go back to 4. Right? We finished cut 4 here. So we add the corners. 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Whoops, excuse me. Left on me. Ready? 5. Here, 6. Here, 7. 8. Okay, let's do it together. Starting at 1. Ichi. Ni. San. Shi. Go. Roku. Shichi. Hachi. One more time together. Ichi. Ni. San. Shi. Go. Roku. Shichi. Hachi.